Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators Kaleidoscope panel for NTC 22. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm the sales manager at Community IT.
So Stephanie Cruz, so excited to be here with you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Kim. I'm a 1.5 generation Korean American.
My name is Sandy Martins. I was born and raised in Boston, currently living here in Rhode Island.
Angela, what have you done as a manager to foster that culture of health and equity and inclusivity for those under your supervision?
Yeah, so I think in the last few years, I think everyone has had to deal with this in some sort of way. I don't know anyone that has been able to avoid this, right? Just with everything that's been happening in the last few years. I think at our organization at Academy of Hope, and to be honest, one of the things that really attracted me to this organization 2 years ago was that the leadership, when I looking, you could tell it was very diverse. And from there, I was originally attracted to that. And I heard a lot about their strategic goals and plans that really had a focus on the DEI lens. So that was really, really attractive to me. But overall, I think as an organization from the top down, we really stopped and had to acknowledge the times we live in. And we had to really come to an understanding of this is what we're all dealing with. We have very challenging times. It's hard to just come in and work like everything is normal. There was a lot of pain and suffering that was happening within our families and communities that we really needed to acknowledge that there's just a lot happening at home and around the world. For me specifically, I really was trying to be very sensitive and just acknowledge. I raised my hand and I said, I really want to be very sensitive about how I bring myself to work and how I'm managing my direct reports, and say I would like more tools and resources to make sure that I'm doing a good job and doing it justice, and that I don't have all the answers. So I started from that point. And then as a leadership team, from senior all the way down to the mid-level leadership, I mean, we really led the way in providing a space, giving people time to just openly talk whatever was on their mind that they felt comfortable sharing, and giving ourselves grace and starting things like wellness communities. We do have at our organization, because we heard loud and clear from many staff surveys that there was a huge interest in starting a DEI task force and committee. So we do have one of those here that often are always listening and taking a pulse of the organization, and then putting forth some strategies and tactics of improving how to make our organization more inclusive and more equitable. So we do have it very much ingrained in our strategic plan. Our individual team and individual goals are all inclusive of making sure we think through our objectives with a DEI lens. There's, as you can imagine, there's tons of conversation that happens. So it's very much a two-way street of making sure we're all have agency and a voice at the table to reflect. And I'll just close out with this personally for me has been a really big time for me to look inward and look at myself and our entire organization. The leadership has really been absolutely loving Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead, to really make sure, and this totally relates to the past couple of years, to help us have really, really tough conversations. That sounds like nothing, but it really has been extremely transformative for our organization, when people have those bubbling feelings that they're not putting forward, or talking behind people's backs, or the meeting after the meeting and you talk behind somebody's back or whatever, those things create a negative and perhaps even toxic environment, which could definitely relate to the DEI viewpoints. And so this piece has extremely been helpful in helping our leadership to bridge those gaps and teaching us tools, being extremely clear about what you want and setting those expectations, as someone mentioned earlier, being very vulnerable about, I make mistakes, we're all human, it's okay. And, just really making sure that we make a cultural change across our organization, starting from leadership and showing the rest of staff we are actively making efforts to change the culture here, because we have to, because people are voting with their feet and leaving, and it's just a reality. So all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. With the voting for your with your feet thing, NPR, I was listening to them a couple months ago, I think, at this point, and everybody was talking about, it's the great resignation, it's the great resignation. And they really were like, no, it's not a resignation, it's a renegotiation. If you, as an organization, are willing to listen to what your staff are saying and, go to them and meet them where they are, but listen and do what they need, give them what they need to be able to succeed, that they will stay. And so, with that, I know that one of the things that has been also very prevalent has been self-care. And I want to do another shout out to the coffee talk this morning, because I felt like I was like, did you guys just take my agenda and do the thing? But everybody's talking, it's great. They had a lot of really great ideas on this, but and people in chat, please, you've been great sharing and making comments. I'd love to hear from you, and also from Sandy. Not all self-care is bubble baths. What do you do for self-care professionally to make sure that both you and your staffers, like Jethro, can succeed?
Absolutely. I love this question. So there's a few things that I consider for practicing professional self-care. Number one, and Jethro can probably attest to this, that I'm really big on organizing and managing my time. There's a quote that I look at every morning as I start my day that says, for every minute spent organizing, an hour is earned. So the things that I do to earn my hour back or to manage my time effectively is that at the end of every week, I check my calendar to the following week to ensure what it's looking like. Is it a really meeting heavy week? Is it involving a lot of internal conversations, external conversations? And based on that, I kind of do my best to really fit in blocks of time where I have a break or catch up, or for that matter, just have a moment to kind of switch gears in between meetings. I also feel the need that, based on the workload that's going on, to ask the meeting owners if I'm needed at the meeting. A lot of times you're just thrown into meetings just because. So if this is an area where I can come up to speed based on some meeting minutes or notes, I'd rather do that than have to sit in within that hour time frame. But of course, if you don't ask, you don't know. I also do my best to stick to my rituals, stick to my yoga rituals, meditation. And for about 30 minutes to an hour of every morning, I check out my day to ensure where I'm going, to really organize my day accordingly. And that's something that my organization does, is that they really support focus time, or DNS, or do not schedule timeframes, which are usually 2 to 3 hour blocks that they put on our calendars. And it's meant for us to really focus and complete our deliverables. Something else that I do honor in our practice is mental health days off. And I just want to preface this to say that, if you have vacation time or personal time, and depending on your organization's policy, to not feel guilty about using that time for a mental break. I remember really early on in my career, I used to feel so guilty for even the thought or the idea of taking a day off, because, I needed to work hard. I needed to show that I'm dedicated. But really over time, I was actually burning myself out, which meant that I wasn't working to my best ability. So it took, a few years for me to recognize the importance of having that healthy balance between work and self-care, definitely for the sake of my sanity, for my health, as well as my team members. So I would ensure to really take the break when I needed it. And lastly, if you're not happy doing what you're doing, or for that matter, being in an environment, then do what you need to do to find the next journey in your career. I think that a lot of times too, people feel very complacent or comfortable where they are, and they're afraid of taking that next step or that next jump in their career. I always say to myself that I have a expiration date when I join an organization. Usually it's like 4 to 5 years, where, you know, the first 2 years I'm really getting to learn the culture, really to understand everyone. And then by year 3, 4, 5, that's where I really envision myself to see the long term in here. You know, how is the growth rate at the organization? Do I see myself growing within the organization too? Are there a lot of opportunity for me to grow? And again, I go back to the culture of it. If it's not conducive or healthy as well, there's plenty of opportunities out there. You should never feel like you're stuck or you need to stay there. Do what we need to do to gain happiness and make that step forward to really move forward with your journey.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Just have Angela, you know, with building with that, all those great ideas of like planning and that building off that 5 years, what advice would you give to, you know, a junior staff member or somebody who's, you know, really in that first part of their career in nonprofit IT?
Yeah, I was extremely fortunate to make a lot of mistakes in my early career on my own. And I, as a 1.5 first generation Korean American, my parents did not ever work in the corporate world. I had none of that to lean on. So I made a lot of mistakes and did the best that I could. So I try very intentionally to pass on those things to my team to help them learn these things as I tell them. Of course, you always learn better when you go through that yourself, but I try to pass on those lessons learned. I think the biggest mistake that I made early in my career is, and I really remember this very early on in tech, actually, I thought it was the responsibility and job of my manager to look out for my professional career growth. And I distinctly remember at a performance review, I said, why did my manager not come up with professional goals for me? Why didn't they focus on that? And some organizations, do we all do performance reviews and work through that throughout the year? No, obviously not every organization does that. So I think that was my biggest lesson learned, is make sure that you take control of your own career growth and professional development. Think through where you want to be in 5-10 years. Do you want your boss's job? How do they get there? What skills are needed? Look at their job description. What's the delta? Where are your gaps and how do you get there? And really make sure you have a very intentional plan, whether it's at work and they have professional development tools and training and resources and funds available, or maybe you do that on your own time outside and you take courses, or maybe you get with a mentor. I'm a huge proponent of mentoring. It's never too late. You're never too old to have a mentor. I actually suggested to my team this year to have a mentor that will help them in the specific areas that they really want to improve on. Public speaking, or maybe speaking up more, project management, whatever that might be. Or they want to become an entrepreneur, so they want to gain more skills there. They are pairing themselves with the appropriate person to manage that time with that mentor on their own. And I really think, and what I've also started to do is to actually have quarterly performance reviews together with me. That is not required by the organization. We only have annual, but we do a quarterly review to talk about how they're doing, any corrections made or improvements they can make or that I can make to help them develop and grow. All of that is extremely important that we do at our organization. And I really take time to help teach them tools. I've learned a lot of things on the job in my career, so I try to pass that on. Things like Excel, tools and tricks, a pivot table, a VLOOKUP. I learned way early on, never stopped using that. So I continue to try to pass that knowledge along. Additionally, what I would say is to be very clear about what you want and what you're looking for. If your goal in the next 5-10 years down the road is to become a CTO or a CIO of an organization, make that very clear and have that conversation with your manager or leadership and say, this is where I want to go. Can you help me devise a plan to get there in the next 1 to 2, 3, whatever years? And it'll be very interesting when you put it out into the world and you tell people what you want. The opportunities somehow seem to appear your way because you've told people, and they remember when you said, oh, I want to be a CIO or whatever, that they do remember you the next time something pops up. It's been incredible in that way. That's actually how I got this job. It came up on my radar because I was being very intentional about what I was looking for. In addition, in terms of what we've mentioned earlier, giving people voice and agency, I really, really underscore with my team to ask for help and ask for guidance early if you don't know what to do or you don't know how to go about something. Instead of wasting your time sitting with something, or if you don't understand clearly what's expected, make sure you ask those questions early on versus when it's too late and the deliverable is due. We've learned as an organization, clear is kind. This comes straight from the Brené Brown book, Dare to Lead. This has been transformational for us because I was thinking in certain situations, I was delegating and I would tell somebody, go do X. And then come time when I was looking for an update, they hadn't completed what I expected. I learned because I was not being clear exactly what I thought done looked like. And that's been extremely important. When I said, go operationalize this policy, in my head, actually, that I did not verbalize, I actually was thinking about a procedure, a policy, and communication plan, but I had never verbalized that. And that was my error. I think the last two things I would say is be vulnerable with your team and model that. The first thing is the leader should show that they can be vulnerable and show that when they are human, that we all make mistakes. So if you make a mistake, it's completely fine. You're not going to be penalized for it. We learn from this and move on. And the last thing I would say is empower them to have agency and let them know. I have had certain instances where folks didn't feel like they had authority nor agency, and I had to, as their manager, help facilitate that. And for example, in a setting or a group meeting, say that this person will be the lead and will be responsible for A, B, and C. And that's been helpful as well.
No, absolutely. And I love how there's a lot of suggestions coming in from chat that are absolutely dovetailing in really well with all of those and all of those items. Chat, please feel free to add in and put in any questions into your chat. We do have a little bit of time for Q&A. Our goal was to make sure that we had some organizational practices and individual behaviors that can, promote a safer, equitable, and more inclusive nonprofit tech industry, sort of as a roundup before, anybody who has Q&A, if there's any questions that come in. I'd love to do a round robin, just each of you. What investments should leadership in nonprofits make to bring in and retain historically underrepresented staff? And I don't know, we can also do a small versus large nonprofits sort of thing in that. I don't know, whoever wants to. Steph, do you want to go first? I keep on picking on you first.
Sure. So I think it's interesting when you think about bringing in and retaining. I feel like we think about the external process of bringing people to the organization. And I really have been thinking a lot about what an organization needs to do within to create the space so that when someone arrives, that they can stay, that they feel valued, that they feel seen, and that they can effectively contribute to the organization. And so for me, I think that means actual training around diversity, equity, and inclusion for staff at every level, from leadership, mid-management, and junior level, so that folks can understand and be aware of their own biases, of how they show up in conversations. I think to Angela's point, this impacts, performance reviews, how we engage in meetings, but really creating that training and awareness and learning, it has to happen, because we can't just say that we are creating a diverse and equitable environment because we are hiring 5 new people of color. What are we doing within the organization to create a culture that can really create a space for all of us to really understand how to work together and work together in a way that's very effective? So I think that's definitely something that I would say is important. And then the point that this is not it's not one time. You don't have someone come in and do diversity and inclusion for your organization one time to make you a more diverse and inclusive organization. There's staff turnover, there's the organizational policies that shift. This is an ongoing effort, and the organization needs to be committed and continue to do the work daily to successfully create this type of environment.
I'll jump in on this one too.
Yep.
So there's 2 things that I would recommend for areas of investment that leadership should consider to bring in and retain historically underrepresented staff. One, and I think, Angela, you mentioned it earlier, workplace mentoring. A research done by Conboy and Kelly says that organizations with mentoring programs has shown that it improves promotion and retention of diverse groups, increasing that for the rate of men and women by 15 to 38% compared to organizations that don't have mentored or workplaces. At Mentor, our organization, we have a senior director of systems innovation by the name of Charlene, who builds partnerships with companies and workforce development agencies to maximize quality mentoring in the workplace. So I'm definitely glad to share more information, or for that matter, drop in a link on how folks can learn more, or for that matter, develop mentoring workplaces at their organization. The other investment leadership should consider to create an inclusive, to do this is create an inclusive hiring process, which actively recognizes diversity and embraces a wide range of qualities that candidates may bring to the organization. Of course, there's many advantages to that, such as the company's reputation, which in return attracts and retains the talent. I read a research on monster.com where it said that 86% of candidates globally say DEI in the workplace is important to them. And then additionally, 62% of those folks would turn down a job offer if it came from a culture that didn't support diverse workforce. I think that the year 2020 was a real wake-up call for many organizations, where they recognize what we, the underrepresented people, have always known about racial injustice and inequality. So for leadership, really investing the time and having a thoughtful approach to inclusive hiring, I think is certainly important to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100% agree with everything that's been mentioned. So I don't want to repeat that. To add on, we at our organization at Academy of Hope, we do hire first or post positions internally, and then we give our internal staff an opportunity to apply, and then we also post externally. I know our HR team has definitely made a great deal of effort to be a lot more inclusive and equitable. And we recently did a compensation equity assessment to look at our local markets and industry benchmarks to make sure our compensation, that there weren't any disparities there. I think everyone has mentioned the professional development. I would imagine most companies, or I hope most companies and organizations have professional development dollars. Use them. Absolutely use them. And it should be very intentional and strategic. We also have a new hire buddy system internally for staff that started our organization, so that you have somebody outside of your team that connects you with the organization to get a lay of the land, understand the culture, understanding where you fit inside the organization, and just to have a sounding board is always important. And then we always, or in our team, we talk a lot about how to manage up and also manage sideways to really help people be successful and grow and develop here. So that's something that our team talks about quite a bit as well.
Those are all really amazing. We do have a question that came in from chat. what are some of the challenges that you face when trying to address with leadership glaring issues that are affecting the organization? I don't know who wants to jump in on that one.
I feel like for me, it's how do I convey that clearly to them regarding the challenge that I'm having, and whether they are in support of what I am sharing with them. Because a lot of times, too, depending on who the leadership or the role that they have, they could either be very vulnerable and understanding of the situation, or at times they could just use their role or position to, kind of dumb down the situation and not really support in that aspect. So I try to understand, like, how can I really clearly and effectively try to share out that what I'm thinking about, or for that matter, the issues that I'm experiencing, in hopes that they would be able to, be there to support and guide me through it.
I think for our organization, we actually just recently went through something that caused a major cultural shift for us. And the way that we went about it, tackling that, was we realized that there were murmurings happening and we needed to address that at the leadership level. And we really focused on providing staff with a safe place and space to talk about whatever they were feeling. So we did have a staff, this is very old school. We had a staff comment box, and also folks were able to email in and anonymously, so they felt protected and safe. And those were all read by senior leadership, were sorted through, and the senior leadership team actually held a town hall to talk about those things. It was a very tough conversation. Like I said earlier, we had a lot of very, very tough conversations, and it needed to be said. We gave folks the space and time to talk about those things. And then, importantly, we then came back to everyone to say, we hear you, we acknowledge your concerns, and now we are putting these, we're creating a plan around it to improve and to tackle and resolve. So we were being very intentional about showing folks that we're listening and we're acting upon that.
Excellent. Yeah. So we do have about 5 minutes left. There aren't any other Q&As on. I do have a couple of slides to share. Just sort of summarizing what we've been talking about. If we could get that up on screen. So, really in summary, making sure that organizations are valuing their time, staff, and opinions, creating, work-life boundaries, stick to them, create space to listen. And, there are people who are probably also very bad at asking for what they need. So, like we mentioned earlier, model asking for help, scaffold in, build in, get those people used to saying what they need. Invest in your staff, provide quality benefits, and establish a culture of actually using them. PTO is not there to just languish away. Use it. Make sure people are taking vacations. Allocate funds and time for professional development. Make sure that managers know that they are expected to invest time and effort into developing junior staff. And, creating and fostering an open community, making sure that you can have those conversations, like Angela said, about, learning how to communicate with each other about tough concepts. If, bringing up a way to, flag a microaggression without necessarily having to stop a conversation, the entire, stop dead, and mentoring. This is just the beginning of this wonderful conversation, and people have been working towards this for years and years, and cultural shifts take a really long time, and we always have to revisit them. There's a collaborative notes page in Google. I failed to focus on that at the beginning of the presentation, but there is a collaborative notes Google Doc, and if I'm going to be pulling some of these suggestions, if people haven't put them in there already, we also put a link to a bunch of resources, including the book that we've been mentioning a couple of times, Dare to Lead, as well as her podcast. There are a whole host of other things. There's a link to a mentoring.org, why workplace mentoring matters, PDF, a couple different online resources, and podcasts, HBR Women at Work. There was a podcast about leading with authenticity, and lots of different really great resources. I just want to say that this has been a really wonderful time talking with everyone, and I want to thank Steph and Angela and Sandy. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me and being able to share with us. I've put your organization websites and your LinkedIn's. Everyone, please feel free to reach out to us to continue the conversation. And I know that we are pretty much at time, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.